Good evening, this is NovaWire News, bringing you the latest on a major development shaking the foundations of U.S. trade policy and executive power. Tonight, a federal appeals court has delivered a landmark decision, ruling that former President Trump's sweeping tariffs on imported goods are unlawful and cannot stand as they were originally imposed. This decision directly challenges the core of the America First economic agenda, which prioritized aggressive trade measures, and raises serious questions about the extent of executive authority used to launch what many called a global trade war. The court found that President Trump overstepped the powers granted by Congress, using emergency authority in ways Congress never intended. The ruling emphasized that such powers are not a blank check for the executive branch to reshape international trade policy unilaterally. For businesses hit hard by retaliatory duties, rising costs, and disrupted supply chains, this could mark a significant turning point. Many companies have struggled to adapt, facing layoffs, closures, and uncertainty as a result of the tariffs. Supporters of the tariffs argue the ruling is an example of judicial overreach, undermining efforts to protect American industries. Meanwhile, critics say the decision restores a crucial balance to the separation of powers, ensuring that no president can bypass Congress on such impactful economic decisions. The case was brought by a coalition of importers and business groups who claimed the tariffs caused them significant financial harm and bypassed Congress's constitutional authority to levy taxes and duties. Their legal challenge has now been validated by the court. The court's agreement with these arguments sets a powerful precedent, potentially limiting how future presidents can use economic tools like tariffs without explicit congressional approval. This could reshape the way trade policy is crafted for years to come. While the debate is far from over and appeals are expected, the legal ground has shifted dramatically. The entire tariff strategy now faces uncertainty, as both sides prepare for the next phase in this high-stakes legal and political battle. The court's decision centers on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, a law designed to address national emergencies. The Trump administration argued IEPA gave the president broad authority to impose tariffs in response to economic threats, including those from foreign nations. But the court rejected this argument, ruling that IEPA was never meant to grant sweeping long-term power to reshape global trade policy. The judges emphasized that regulating commerce and imposing duties is Congress's job, not the president's, reaffirming the separation of powers. The plaintiffs argued the administration bypassed the legislative process, creating uncertainty for businesses, a point the court found especially compelling. This ruling narrows the president's ability to use emergency powers for trade policy, signaling that major shifts require congressional approval and oversight. Former President Trump quickly condemned the ruling on social media, calling it a politically motivated attack. He warned that ending the tariffs would devastate American industry and vowed to fight the decision. The current White House, which has kept many tariffs in place, also disagreed with the court, expressing confidence that the tariffs would be upheld on appeal. Administration lawyers argue the president acted within legal authority to protect national security, citing past uses of emergency powers. Behind the scenes, officials are preparing for a Supreme Court battle, warning that removing tariffs could weaken America's trade position. Both Trump and the White House frame this as a fundamental fight over the direction of U.S. economic policy, ensuring the legal battle is far from over. The court's decision was sharply split, with 7 judges siding with the majority and 4 dissenting, underscoring just how deeply divided the legal community is on this issue. The close vote revealed not only differing interpretations of the law, but also the high stakes and intense debate surrounding presidential authority in economic matters. The majority of the panel argued that if a president is allowed to impose sweeping tariffs under emergency powers, it could fundamentally erode Congress's constitutional authority over trade and economic policy. They warned that such unchecked power might set a dangerous precedent, shifting the balance of power away from the legislative branch and undermining the system of checks and balances that is central to American democracy. Importantly, the court decided to pause the immediate impact of its ruling. This means that for now, the tariffs will remain in place until October 14th, giving both sides time to prepare for the next legal steps. This temporary reprieve is crucial, as it allows the government to appeal the decision without causing sudden changes that could disrupt businesses and markets. By delaying the enforcement of its ruling, the court aims to prevent abrupt economic disruption. This window gives the administration a critical opportunity to take the case to the Supreme Court, while also allowing businesses and investors to brace for potential changes in trade policy. The dissenting judges, however, strongly disagreed. They argued that the president acted fully within the powers granted by the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, and insisted that the plaintiffs had not met the high legal threshold required to overturn an executive action of this magnitude. This split among the judges reflects a much broader debate in the country over how much deference courts should give the president, especially when it comes to national security and trade. The case has become a flashpoint for questions about the limits of executive power and the role of the judiciary in checking that power. The case is the culmination of years of legal challenges, with countless briefs, hearings, and arguments leading up to this moment. It now stands as the most consequential test of presidential economic authority in recent memory, drawing national attention from lawmakers, legal scholars, and the business community alike. Ultimately, the outcome of this case will shape not only the future of U.S. trade policy, but also set a precedent for how far executive power can reach in economic affairs. The decision will influence future arguments about the limits of presidential authority and the ongoing balance between the branches of government. The tariffs have had a sweeping and far-reaching impact on the U.S. economy, fundamentally altering the landscape of international trade. Not only did they double government revenue from import duties, but they also became a significant source of funding for the federal government, changing how the U.S. approached its economic policies. These tariffs affected nearly every sector of the economy, from manufacturing to retail. Many businesses faced higher costs for imported materials and components, forcing them to pass those increased expenses onto consumers in the form of higher prices. Small business owners in particular struggled to adapt, while everyday Americans felt the pinch at the checkout counter. On the other hand, some industries saw the tariffs as a powerful tool to bring jobs back to America, especially in sectors like steel and manufacturing. Politically, the tariffs became a symbol of President Trump's bold and confrontational approach to global trade, energizing his supporters and sparking heated debate across the country. The most dramatic confrontations were with China, America's largest trading partner. Supporters of the tariffs argue they are vital for protecting national security, reviving American industry, and leveling the playing field in global commerce. They point to examples of reshored manufacturing and new investments in U.S. factories. However, critics, including many lawmakers from both parties, argue that the tariffs have hurt U.S. exporters, reduced competitiveness, and led to retaliatory measures from other countries. Critics also claim the tariffs violated international trade norms and created widespread uncertainty for businesses. The plaintiffs in this case, importers and industry groups, argued that the tariffs caused them direct financial harm, disrupted supply chains, and made long-term planning difficult. They further contended that the tariffs were enacted illegally, bypassing proper procedures. For these plaintiffs, the court's ruling is not just a legal victory, but a long-awaited validation of their arguments and a potential turning point in U.S. trade policy. With the appeals court ruling, attention now turns to a likely Supreme Court showdown. The administration has until October 14th to appeal, and the case's constitutional questions make it a strong candidate for review. If the Supreme Court declines to hear the case, the lower court's decision stands invalidating most Trump-era tariffs and triggering a major shift in trade policy. This would lower costs for importers and retailers but anger domestic industries that benefited from tariff protection. If the Supreme Court takes the case, it could set a precedent defining presidential power over trade for decades. The stakes are enormous, with businesses, consumers, and global partners watching closely. The legal fight over presidential authority in trade is just beginning. This ruling goes beyond tariffs, striking at the heart of presidential versus congressional power. By limiting executive authority under IEPA, the court affirms Congress's primary role in trade and taxation. The decision could make future presidents more cautious about using emergency powers for sweeping economic policies. Internationally, striking down the tariffs may signal a move away from protectionism and help repair strained alliances. The case highlights the judiciary's role as a check on executive power, ensuring even national security policies face legal scrutiny. Ultimately, this is a pivotal moment in the debate over how much economic power a president should wield. Regardless of the final outcome, the ruling has already reshaped the conversation about executive action and constitutional limits.